He said, I'd rather work with one person who's passionate. And that's why I say true passion is what true passion does. Repeat that after me, ladies and gentlemen. True passion is what true passion does. It was March 3rd, 1993. And I'm a sports buff, so I was watching the ESPY Awards. And that night, there was a coach from North Carolina State being honored with the Arthur Ashe Award. And a part of the reason why he was being honored was because of his legacy, his passion for the type of work that he did, but also how he interacted with people. And this man, his name is Jimmy V. They call him Jimmy V, but Jimmy Valvano. And I remember as he was helped up on the stage by Dick Vitale. This is a man, ladies and gentlemen, at that time who was dying of cancer. So someone had to help him to the stage. And when he arrived on stage, you know how the award shows, they always had the teleprompters, the cue cards to let them know that you only had 5 or 10 minutes. He told the people, he said, I'm not worried about the cue cards today. He said, because I'm enjoying the time that I have. But one of the key things that he had in his message, and I wrote it down because I want you to hear the essence of what he stood for, but his passion that was throughout that message. He said, how do you go from where you are to where you want to be? I think you have to have an enthusiasm for life. You have to have a dream, a goal, and you have to be willing to work for it. That's what passion is all about. How do you get from here to there with enthusiasm? And when you look at the two concepts that I'm talking to you all about this morning, recapturing and reigniting your passion. And I gave you a handout, and the fill-in-the-blank areas, I want you to do this on your own this evening or when you get back to work. But the first thing I want you to reflect on, though, is where were you when you started as a child care professional? Where were you? And where were you as a professional? But where were you as a person? Because how many of you went to college and knew you were going to work in child care right away once you graduated? How many of you came from a different profession and you transitioned? Now, how many of you would say through serendipity you stumbled into child care? Okay. But where were you when you started? But another thing is, where are you now as a child care professional, as a person? And then the last thing is, where are you headed as a child care professional and as a person? I'm often asked by people, how did you start speaking? What inspired you and motivated you to speak? And I have to share with you, just to give you a little history about myself, based on statistics, and I know you all work with children and you work with numbers, you work with percentages, I'm not supposed to be here speaking to you today. Because at the age of 2, I was ripped out of my mother's home by the Child Protective Agency, and I was put into foster care. And I spent time at St. Vincent's Catholic Charity, my brother and myself. My brother's 1 year older than I am. And at the age of 7, we were allowed to go back to my biological mother's home, and she raised us in Cherry Hill in South Baltimore. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Cherry Hill, the young boys were taught that only 2 things come out of Cherry Hill: criminals and jail time. But I had a mother said, he told me you're a motivational speaker. I said, yes. She said, well, how much will you charge us to come speak to 70 first graders? I said, I'm not going to charge you anything. She said, what? She said, you're a professional, right? I said, yes, ma'am, I am. She said, then we will pay you. So I said, okay, $75. So they had 3 classes, and the teachers all put up $25. Now, I worked at Sweetheart Cup Company in Owens Mills, Maryland. Right across the street was Toys R Us. So I went and spent $80 in jump ropes, hula hoops, yo-yos, because my first thought was, how do you get 71st graders to pay you any attention? So I brought these things. As soon as I walked into school, she had a table like this. I dumped all the toys over the table, and I asked each teacher, send your top student from your class to get something. So the kids came and got something, and they walked back into the audience, and they sat down. So the other students were like, ooh, let me see, let me see. So I told the other students, if you listen to me, you'll win something. I said, so I'm going to ask you questions afterwards. So I was talking to the ladies and gentlemen on that day about how to keep their dreams alive, how to not allow negative people to grow like weeds and steal their dreams. And I asked them, how do you plant a tree? And the lady, and the kids were yelling, dig a hole, drop the seed, cover the hole, water it. I mean, they were with me. I could tell that whoever developed them and was teaching them prior to that day, they did well because they knew exactly how to plant and grow a tree. But the key thing that happened to me afterwards was I walked through that audience and I shook every young person's hand and I asked them what his or her dream was. And they all said things like, I want to be a ballerina, I want to be a singer, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a princess, I want to be the president of the United States. But it was one young lady, she sat there and she had single braids going down each side of her head with pretty barrettes, and she looked at me and she said, my dream is to live. She said, I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to go up there. My dream is to live. The hair on the back of my neck, yes, I had hair on the back of my neck, stood up because I'm looking at this young lady and I said, out of everything that a young child at that age could dream to be or do, her dream was to live. But do you know, ladies and gentlemen, how many adults today have stopped living? How many adults today have stopped putting out their passion for their life, for their work, and even for their family? And I think about that all the time because her face, her message to me made it an honor that day to be there. She said, I want to live. And just like with Jimmy V, that's the same thing that he's talking about. How do you live with passion? How do you live with enthusiasm? How do you live with purpose? Because that's very important. The young people that you teach and that you care for, they're at an age where your influence, your impact is significant. I told you all on Friday when they were in there, some of these kids, they love coming to school. They love coming to see you. Because some of them get kicked and put down all weekend. So when Monday comes, they love